Good evening and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our webinar series, Embracing Change. I want to welcome my dear friend, Carlos Gallardo. Thank you very much for being with us from Spain. How are you today, Carlos?
Hi, Feisal. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm all right. A very sunny day here in Barcelona.
Okay, perfect. So, Carlos, let's begin with a brief background introduction of yourself, your family, the generation, and so that everybody has a framework before we get into the nitty-gritty of your experience in terms of succession in this beautiful family and family business that you're part of.
Nice. So in terms of context of the family, so I'm third generation in the family. So, and we are currently around 35 members in the family, including the second generation and the third generation. My grandfather passed away already in the mid 80s. Okay, so, and then there's a fourth generation that is the younger generation that is made of 19 people. So that including, so 19 of the 34, which the ages range from the oldest being around 29 to the youngest being 7. Okay, so that will be the generation 4. My generation 3, we are 6 cousins. I have 1 brother, 1 sister, and 3 cousins. And the 6 of us, we range from late 40s through late 50s. So we are quite together. And then the generation 2 is my father and my uncle and spouses.
Okay, so all right. So now, in terms of business, what is the family business? What does it comprise of, and active versus non-active family members, just to have an idea?
Sure. So in terms of being the main business, the legacy business is a pharmaceutical company. So we do R&D, so it's innovation company developing our own products for medical dermatology. So we develop products for conditions such as psoriasis, atopic dermatitis, acne, etc. So any condition that a dermatologist would diagnose and prescribe. Okay, so our products are prescribed for dermatology indications, and our main customer is a dermatologist. The company was founded by my grandfather in the mid-40s, and still is, as of today, the largest, let's say, asset in the family. In terms of revenues, is around 900 million. And we have presence in Europe and in the US, and in other geographies, we partner with local players. But having said so, we starting in early 2000s, we started diversifying our interests, and not only as pure investments, but also in investments where we are active as operators. So around 10 years ago, we acquired a hospital group that today is comprised of 20 hospitals and also 35 health centers. And we are now the second largest private hospital group in Spain. So the hospital group is confined to serve Spanish patients, and all the hospitals are in Spain. And this, let's say, will be our second largest asset in the family. And then we have more the investments. So we have private equity investments, and we have the standard, other investments like real estate, fixed income, stocks, etc.
But that's through the family office? Is that through the family office?
That's through the family office. So when we think what we call the Gallardo family group, we think of 3 buckets. One bucket being the pharmaceutical company, which name is Almirall. The second bucket is the hospital group, which the name is Vitas, the name of the group. And the third bucket is the family office, from which we think family office as an investment office that does the capital preservation. So the hospital group and the pharma company are the wealth generators, and the family office is wealth conservation, wealth preservation. Okay. And all 3 are run independently, and they have their own boards. And then on top of that, we have the family council. Okay. So that's a little bit the governance. And in terms of family involvement, all of the 6 cousins, so my father is still active in the business. He's the chairman of the pharmaceutical company. And then the 6 cousins, we are active in the governance of different places in the governance. It's, for example, in my case, I'm the vice chairman of the pharmaceutical company. I'm, of course, a member of the family council, like all the other family members. And then my brother is the chairman of the hospital group. My cousin is also in the hospital group. I have one other cousin in the pharmaceutical company. So all the 6 of us are in the governance. The only employee, there's only one employee, that is my brother Jorge, that is, let's say, also employed in the hospital group as chairman, but executive chairman. The rest of us, we are non-executives. So let's say that in general, we are we have trended towards a pure professional management, and where family members we are overseeing very closely, because again, we see ourselves as operators, not as pure investors. We are operators, so we are quite hands-on, but from a non-executive perspective.
So this has been a policy, or this just evolved in terms of this choice of being governance or non-executive, except for your brother as an exception?
It's been an evolution. So when I was in my early 20s out of college, there was a policy in place for people that wanted, for family members that wanted to work in the group. And there was quite standard. So, you need to have a college degree, you need mandatory 3 or 4 years working in a different company outside the group, and recommended an MBA. I think that was the main criteria. And so there was a clear avenue or a clear roadmap for family members to get into the family business. This has changed over time. I left the business, then I came back. My cousin was also an employee of a pharmaceutical company, and he left. And for a number of reasons, everyone except my brother, we've left our executive positions. And more recently, we decided that there's going to be no roadmap for family members to get into the family business as executives. We're going to encourage them to work outside of the group, and only in very special circumstances, we as a family council or family group, we are going to try to tap and convince family members to come to run the group, but again, by exception. But probably this has been the most difficult decision of all the many decisions that you have to make as a family in business. And we've been going back and forth. So if you ask me that if all of us are totally convinced that this is the right policy, the answer is no. I think there are arguments for and against having family members working as executives. And, I'm sure that all of us can put the list, and it will be very similar list, your list and my list. And depends on how personal experiences and where the group is, willing more towards one side or willing more towards the other. And now more recently, we have leaned towards not having this roadmap for family members becoming employees. But this might change in the future.
Is it because there's 14 people coming in next, or is it because of experiences that you've had speaking to other families, or is it just your own personal experiences?
I think it's both things. I think it's in our case, Generation 3, both my cousin and I, we had a little bit of mixed experiences in terms of progressing into the organization, so that didn't help. But also when you look down and you see the next generation that is 19 members, then it's difficult to find the right equation to say, okay, if you create a roadmap for them, how you make sure that, we are quite meritocratic as well. So how the best talent really goes to the top. For example, what happens if, the oldest becomes the CEO, but there's another guy that is 5-6 years older than that maybe has much better potential, or is more able to run the company. So you're going to fire the first CEO because the second one you think is better. So there are a lot of things so many things to take into account, that are many sources of conflict. And again, it's very difficult to be completely objective. We're a family, so we're going to be subjective by nature. So we think, okay, this is a potential source of conflict. So for the time being, because we don't have a magic formula, we are going to, to just remove a roadmap. And then in the future, let's see how things pan out. And we might come up with a nice way to reopen this route to the family business.
Okay, so we'll go into your story in a bit, but in terms of what about entrepreneurship, like the encouragement of starting something new? Like 10 years ago, you went and bought this hospital group. Was this something your brother came up with? Was this from a family office perspective? Was this second gen? Where did this idea and how was this, you know, how did it happen? Like, tell us a little bit about that story.
I think in general, in our family, we're quite entrepreneurial in the sense that we are not afraid to make sometimes what could be described as bold moves when we think we have clarity on what could happen, no? And usually based on risks and opportunities that we see, no? So I mentioned before that the pharmaceutical company is focused on developing products for dermatology, but in the past we had different strategies and we've done, sometimes dramatic changes in our strategy that you could, define as bold, because we saw, for example, in many years ago, we were in respiratory medicine, and although in the R&D department we were quite successful, we thought that in the commercial arena it was going to be very difficult to compete against giants such as JSK, AstraZeneca, Boehringer Ingelheim, etc. And we divested the business and we started from scratch in dermatology, And so, and going back to your question, many years ago, when we were still in respiratory, we were saying, okay, we are competing against these giants. The risk profile of the pharmaceutical company is changing. The business became more risky because of one, the hurdle to innovate new products is higher. So you need more risk and more money. And secondly, you go to the commercial arena to market your products and you're fighting against many other products that are backed by big pharma. So high risk. So we said, okay, now it might be a good time to sell part of the business. And with the proceedings, look for another wealth generator. Okay. So that was the rationale to say, okay, this is, usually you say focus for growth and diversity to sustain. No? We said, okay, we have created a lot of growth focusing on one asset, but this asset is becoming too risky. So instead of having one asset, let's try to have another asset to provide risk diversification. But again, another asset in which we are still operators, we are still roll up our sleeves, and still generates wealth for the family. So with that in mind, we decided to go to the market. So we went public. We did an IPO in 2007, and we sold 30% of the company. Okay. So with the proceedings of this 30% went not to the company, but to the family. And with this 30%, or the equivalent of the 30%, then we started looking for, okay, what do we acquire now that we can run in the long term? And again, it was a very well-structured process with the help of McKinsey and other consultants. It took like 3 or 4 years to say, okay, what do we want to do, in which industry, in which countries, etc. No? And it resulted in the acquisition of the hospital group that at that time, it was only 11 hospitals. So since the acquisition, and again, this speaks of the entrepreneurial nature of the family, we've been building up the group, we've been acquiring other hospital groups, and we've been building new hospitals to the 20 hospitals that we have now. So that's, I think that speaks a little bit of the entrepreneurial mindset that we have in the family.
So how did your brother end up as executive chairman? What was his process and what was the selection process? Was he already in the pharma group? Was he in the family office? Or did he just put up his hand and said, I'd love to do this?
At that time, my brother has a business administration degree, and he had worked in consulting for many years before joining the family office. So he joined the family office and to build from scratch the private equity function. So for many years, he created a team and he had, a pool of cash to invest in private companies, initially in Spain. So he was in that position when we IPO'd the company. So I think it was just natural to say, look, we have a good track record on running private equity. So you know what it means to negotiate, to invest to acquire companies. So, why don't you, take care of this new group that we called at that time Good Grower. Why don't you become the CEO and chairman of Good Grower with the aim to identify this new business opportunity that we want to keep in the family for a long term. So it was quite natural. So let's say there was no competition. There was no other, nor me, nor any of my cousins raised a hand to say, okay, why Jorge and why not me? It was at that time where I recall, there was no friction. It was not a difficult decision.
And in terms of the hands-on or hands-off from your uncle and your dad, did he feel there was free reign, or was there a lot of watching over him and second guessing or any of that nature?
I would say the governance was strong, but professional. So we created a board the board of Good Grower, even at the stage of pre-acquisition, in which there was, independent board members, that one of them ex-McKinsey, that help us, to tailor what was the roadmap of the process we were going to follow to identify an acquisition target. So let's say that the process and the governance was closely supervised by the family, but we were not micromanaging my brother. We said, okay, we have a good board with good people. We like the process. We trust you that you will execute well. And of course, when you present us a target opportunity, we will discuss it thoroughly in the family council, and like any other investment committee would do, right?
Okay. All right. So now let's step back and talk about you and your cousin, right? You mentioned that both of you, after finishing your degrees and your work outside, right, entered the family business and then exited. So how was that experience, without obviously breaking confidentiality, there's a number of, I can see patriarchs on the call, with a few also next gen that are listening, and some of them I know have the policy that you have, where the family members are non-execs. Some are considering them to be execs. Some have family members running the companies. So what happened in that process, and what would you have wished otherwise, maybe, or what will you do differently if you change your policy of having family members, being considered to be in the executive position?
Sure. Maybe also, before I answer the question, as a little bit of background.
Okay.
Also, let's say that the story of my father and my uncle. So
okay, perfect.
That I think is relevant because provides the right context. So the business was founded by my grandfather, that he was very, very hierarchical, very hands-on, and very patriarchal, in the sense that all the decisions came to the top and he made all the decisions. Okay. Then my uncle and my father come into the picture. They both work for the family business. My uncle started working at 16. Imagine, from very, from working the warehouse at 16, and then my father, he went to college. He started in industrial engineering, and then he joined the business. Okay. And then when my grandfather became ill in the early 80s, my father and my uncle take charge of the business, but they take charge in a very unusual way, in which there's no clear leader, because the both wanted to be the boss. So they 1 year, one was the CEO and the other was the chairman, and next year they switched the titles. Okay. At that time, to me, that I was quite young, to me, it seemed okay, that why not? But of course, when I see this arrangement now, I think I'm not sure it makes a lot of sense, right? But anyway, that was the arrangement, and then they divided the areas. You took care of commercial, I take care of R&D and industrial area. Okay. So you have your own kingdom, I have my own kingdom. You have your title, I have my title, no? And this worked or somewhat worked for a period of time. But as you can imagine, there was a lot of, at the end, the big decisions, they came to the end, and they had to make the big decisions. And, there was always, I would say a healthy amount of debate and conflict that most of the times resulted in good decisions for the company, but, a lot of friction and a lot of energy that went into this sort of arguments and interactions. So eventually my uncle decided to leave the pharmaceutical company, and he went to build a family office. So my uncle is the one that created and professionalized the family office. So my father remained as the responsible. Then we jump to my generation. So first, my cousin joined the company more in the commercial area, like his father, and I joined the company more was in business development, and then I would say that, you know, they are not exact progressions in the company. I went to the UK to build the UK commercial affiliate, and I ran it for a number of years, etc. But basically, I would say that we reached a point in which the roadmap that we had for ourselves in the company did not meet the roadmap that let's say my family or my father or had for us, or, you know, and therefore there was a bit of tension there that resulted in first my cousin leaving the company and going to the family business, and then eventually myself in 2013 as well. I left my executive position in the company. So and I can speak more about my case. No, I think in my case, you know, I wanted a very clear roadmap and transparency about, okay, I'm here today. My aspiration is to get here. Let's paint a very clear roadmap on how and when I can get there, with adequate supervision, of course, and with a meritocratic process. But I want to align expectations. Let's make sure we have one plan and that we all are happy with the plan, and the plan is transparent, visible for everyone, and we execute the plan, and let's see what happens. And let's say that we were not able to agree on a plan, so to speak. Okay, and therefore,
very sounds very politically correct way to respond, huh, Carlos?
Well, but you know, yes, the essence is that's the essence of the situation, right? Okay. So, you know, I was not comfortable in continuing a journey that I had no visibility, and therefore I decided to leave the company.
So then what happened? So your cousin went into the family office, right? Correct? And so what did you end up doing, and how was that received, and were you supported with that decision? Because leaving, your cousin and you leaving is a clear indicator to the next gen that something is not working, quote unquote. But depending on the response, I mean, he joined the family office, that's kind of okay, but you went and started to create your own little entrepreneurial project, right? How was that received? Did they support you? Did they also invest with you?
I think of course, the reaction in the family when I left the pharmaceutical company was of disappointment. Okay. So that's the clear word. So of course, this is a family business, multi-generational, and the expectation of the family is that someone from the family was going to take over from my father eventually. So that the only person that remained in the business, in the family, left, so was not received as good news, of course. So it created a little bit of shock in the family. But, you know, that was an irreversible decision from my side. Very, very meditated, but and again, that's the decision I took. And then as you say, I went out to create. I wanted to either start a company or become a stakeholder in the world of digital health. So technology at that time was starting to transform the world of healthcare, and I saw that tremendous value creation through technology, and I wanted to be a player there. Initially, I thought about building a company, but I started to place small bets in startups to learn about technologies, about business models, about opportunities in a credible way as an investor, as a private investor. And then I realized that I enjoyed doing that I got tremendous energy from being there, supporting entrepreneurs, learning about different opportunities, etc., that I became like a professional private investor into early stage health technology. And then, and that was the picture at that time. And I would say that a little bit the wake-up call for the family came in the sense that, and that this goes back to governance. So in addition to having a family council, we have an advisory board to the council, to the family council. And I think that's something that has worked very well for us. So let me spend a minute here.
Yeah.
This is an advisory board made of members of other families that have family businesses, and we choose them. We choose those people that we think have, that have already gone through the challenges that we are going now. So most of the members of the family advisory board are members of generation 4 or maybe even generation 5. So they have gone through the challenges that a third generation might have with the cousins, and they have gone through going public. They have gone through a number of things. They have gone through conflict in the family. And then again, these are members of very well-respected businesses in Europe.
Okay, so European.
So, and then what happened is that this family advisory board, when they saw that, that family members were leaving the company, they said, look, guys, if you really want this to be a family business, clearly you're doing something wrong because the family members are leaving. So, and I think this is very important because I can say that to my father or to my uncle. Anyone in my generation can say that in the family council, that, as you know, these comments will be discounted or disregarded or mixed with the biases that family members have with each other, right? Is the guy that always complains is complaining again. So, going to discard. But if a family advisory board made of members of great families that are bigger, wealthier, more relevant, more important than us, make this comment, then all of a sudden everyone listens. So I think in that case, that the family listened and said, look, maybe we are not walking the talk. We talk about, family business. We talk about having a family protocol. We talk about having a constitution. We talk about multi-generational businesses. And all of a sudden, we are disengaging, or the new members of the family are becoming disengaged. Something is not working. So let's say that there was what we call a transition program put in place, in which basically, to cut it short, because I feel that I'm speaking too much, but to cut it short, my uncle and my father, very clear plan in which my uncle and my father were giving up the reins and starting to leave their governance positions in the family businesses, and my generation was really taking over. At that time, we already were in some boards, but it was a little bit of, window dressing, in the sense that we showed up to the meetings, but maybe the decisions were already taken in the corridor between my father and my uncle. So was, okay, I didn't know that. Good to know. No? And at that time, I said, look, this window dressing is not working because they are leaving and because they have alternatives. So either you make it real, and the way to make it real is that you guys leave.
Okay, so they were giving a timeline. They agreed to a timeline of exit.
They agreed to a timeline. And for example, today my uncle is no longer involved in any governance position in any of the three groups. So he's not in the board of the Pharmaco. He's not in the board of Good Grower Vitas. He's not in the board of the family office. And my father is still in the chairman of the pharmaceutical company, but there's a very clear date that I cannot make public because we are a public company, but there's a very clear date in the diary for, let's say, for handover.
And so just to go back 1 minute to the advisory board, what is the age group of this advisory board, just for the people who are listening to have an idea? Because obviously the age group between generation 2 and 3 is quite diverse. So are they all more elderly, or are they like what is the age group?
I would say there's 4 members now, 1, 2, 3, 4, of which 2 are more on the G2 side.
Okay.
There are 2 that they are in their, let's say, 70s.
Okay.
There's 1 that is in the early 60s, and there's 1 that is more our age. So so there's 2 men, 2 women, and the younger, she's maybe early 50s.
Okay.
So I think it's a good spread.
Yeah, because that means they've had the experience, and they also will get the respect, right, from G2. So
yes.
So during that process, now what about your uncle? Was there support given to him regarding purpose and next stage of life? Because that's very important, right? Without that, any of us, right, will start to, be a little lost, right? But of course, I mean, I'm sure he's
Well,
mature, etc. But yeah.
actually, it's interesting what happened because, according to the constitution, initially the age to leave all the governance positions was 75.
Okay.
Then at that time, by unanimity, by royal decree, it was changed to 80. But then what's happened is that when he at 80 decided to say, okay, I'm leaving my position in all places, family office and the family council. We, the G3s, we thought that there was going to be a loss. So we asked him to remain in the family council. So he's now 84 and he's been these 4 years in the family council. And, as the savvy elder, and, every now and then he says, look, guys, I'm tired, I'm done, I don't want to be more. And we go back and say, no, please stay. Because, he's really doing a very good job in terms of not trying to be in the middle in the, investment committee decisions or more kind of the more mundane type of decisions of the family. But, when he's sitting there, he listens. And then when something relevant, he thinks he can contribute, then, he contributes. And of course, it's always something, that carries a lot of wisdom and that we pay a lot of attention. So his comments still carry a lot of weight and we respect them. We take them into consideration. And then most of the time we completely agree with him. So I think we think that he continues to deliver tremendous value to the company. I think another key success factor is that he already had an important area of interest or hobby of him that he had always worked in parallel, that is paleontology and archaeology. So, when he left that, he created a foundation in archaeology and paleontology that as of today is the most respected foundation in Spain. He does a yearly award in which, the King of Spain comes to give the award and so on. And he has become very active and very respected in this completely different world of archaeology and paleontology. Wow. So for him and he has an office with 3 employees. So that's something that fills him, occupies his time, and he really enjoys because he feels that he's contributing to a noble cause. So I think that also is very helpful, and it was helpful for him to be able then to give up, having a role in the family.
Okay, so just one question before we speak about your dad. When you went out and started investing into, technology in healthcare, in terms of the family, was this part of the family office as an entrepreneurial venture, or was it independent? Did they also invest with you? Like, what was that process? Just to go back.
It was independent. So at that time, again, because as I said before, at that time, I was not sure how my life would pan out. So again, as I said before, I was even thinking about starting my own company. So I didn't want to get into something that would into a long-term commitment. Okay. So I could have gone to the family and request, okay, why don't you give me a pot of money that I will invest into technology, and as a, let's say, a private equity group investing family's money into this scope. Sure. Yeah. But I wanted to keep things more flexible because, again, I didn't know how things were going to pan out at that time. Okay. And so I decided, no, I prefer to be a smaller investor with my own capital, but retain flexibility, that if, an opportunity to build a company in a good space appears, or opportunity maybe to do something different, I have this flexibility.
Okay. So your uncle obviously had this and he's created something beautiful, and congratulations. That's really incredible. Your dad, right now, you said there's obviously, without the date, obviously due to privacy and confidentiality, does he already have an idea of his next steps, or is that still something that is pending?
He has an idea, he already has his office.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah. But I think the idea still needs to be a bit more developed, and to put a bit more flesh into the bone. So he has an area of interest that he wants to do something about, but let's say that he's been running first and then chairing the family business for more than 40 years. So for him, the family business is, I
life.
think that his DNA and the company's DNA and intertwined. So it's difficult for him to be in both places, no?
Yeah.
So he's still very much devoted in terms of day-to-day, in terms of thinking, to the pharma company. So I think the hope is that when he does the switch, that the lights will not go out.
Yeah.
That the lights, that he says, okay, that's the idea, and then yes, and I have very clear implementation.
Yeah.
Clear ways to implement what I have in mind. That I think he will, because I mean he's still at top of his game, super capable.
Yeah.
So I think he will he will be able to build something nice with a nice purpose that will fill his time. And again, he will still be, at the end he will remain to be shareholder of the company, so he will be informed about the how things go in the family business, of course.
So now that you're now vice chairman, and now you're being groomed to be chairman, right? And that process was put in by this advisory board. Can you share a little bit of how this was done without, again, breaking confidentiality? And you just mentioned DNA, right? That right now the company and your dad are pretty much the same DNA. And obviously we all love our fathers and mothers, but at the end of the day, our DNA, yes, the majority is the same, but there's still difference, right? So what are maybe the good choices made, and maybe things that you might have chosen differently, so other people can consider how they would go about their succession or handover?
Well, I think in a family business, what happens is that from very young, you are, even unconsciously, you become part of the business, right? Whether you work there or not, because you, over Sunday dinner and lunch and family meetings, you hear about your uncle, your father talking about the company and so on. And when they're in a good mood, it's because something good has happened in the business. When they're in a bad mood, because something's not working as well, or they lost the game of golf as well. That's another reason why they could be of bad mood. but unconsciously, you become to develop an attachment and emotions to a family business. So I would say that then you go to college and you work for another company, but you already have kind of this attachment to the family business. So when you are asked to, or you think about working from the family business, you are not completely free in your decision, in the sense that unconsciously there are forces that are pulling you, right? So what I'm saying is that I think that if you join the family business at a young age, you join it at a point in life where you're not totally mature, and therefore you don't really know if that's what you want to do in life. Okay. And therefore I think that and how you want to do it, no? So you are more, when I say it's like you jump into a river and you see where the river flows, because that's the river that you have known all your life, right? But you could, if you jump into a river a bit more mature, you can say, okay, I want to jump into a river. I'm going to jump, I'm going to swim on the left side, or I'm going to swim a little bit against the tide first, and then whatever, no? So you do it more conscious way, and more clear what you're doing, no? So I think my first reflection is that I think maturity helps to make the right decisions. And when you are in the family business, sometimes you make the decisions more for other factors than not because you are mature and you know exactly what you want to do. Maybe I'm a bit vague here, but I hope that
the people who are listening understand what you're speaking to. But at the same time, so now that you've come back, you feel that you're coming in with that maturity you're referring to.
Exactly. So I think I didn't plan when I left. When I left, I didn't plan to come back.
Yes.
So I thought that I was really severing my options to really go back to have a more substantial role than not just being a board member, right? Yeah. So, but things have worked this way, I have now the support of the family to, and again, to be completely transparent, and that's the reality. So there's a process that I'm following that could eventually end up on me succeeding my father, or could end up negatively on someone else. So, so I just want to be, I'm very optimistic and confident that things will work out well, but there is a process supervised by the board of directors of the public company that is Almirall, and that we very well designed, very well crafted, and we are planning for success, but anything could happen, no?
Yeah.
So in the sense that now that I'm in this process, I feel much more comfortable because I entered this process and this new opportunity to contribute value to the family business on my own grounds, with my own rules. Not rules, but say, look, this, I'm happy to give a chance to this, but the way it can work for me if, the things are drafted in this way. No? And if we can find common ground that it works for you, great, and let's give it a try. And if not, I'm okay. Let's look at different alternatives. So I came up with a position in which you, thanks to this maturity, what's going to work for me and what's not going to work for me. So I was able to say, okay, yes, but under this framework.
Yeah.
And luckily, this framework made sense to the family, made sense to the family, to the company board, and now we are in this process. And I hope that the process is going to end up very positively to all the stakeholders.
So you mentioned that there are 6 cousins, right? You are 6 cousins, and now it feels a little skewed that your brother and you are running the 2 core family businesses. How was that received by, okay, I guess your sister would be easier to support, but by the other 3 cousins? How was that process in terms of...
Well, yes and no, in the sense that, my cousin, Susanna, she's the president of the family council. So I think that's a position of responsibility and a lot of very, very visible position. So because she represents the family, she represents the Gallardo family group as the chairwoman. So I think that's a substantial role. And my cousin Antonio, he's the chairman of the family office. So he's non-exec, but he has a position of responsibility, and he works closely with the CEO of the family office, of the director of the family office. And so he's adding value, he's contributing, he's very well respected. And my cousin Anna, she's running, and we have other working committees that report to the family council. For example, we have one group that is family development. So how do we make sure that the next generation is involved in the family, has the right training to be responsible shareholder, etc. So she's running this working group for a number of years. She's doing an amazing job, and she's very valued in the family. And my sister, she's running the family foundation. So I would say that is, maybe I didn't paint the full picture at the beginning, but I would say that is quite balanced. Maybe my brother and I, we are more in places where knowledge of industry is more relevant, and maybe there are more representation and kind of overall understanding and common sense and decision making are relevant. But I think that is relatively balanced, and I would say that, of course, the perfect equilibrium doesn't exist. No, but I would say that we are within a range that provides stability, but of course things are always in flow. So now today, since things are working, in 1 year maybe we have another conversation, and I tell you that someone is not happy and we need to revisit things, etc. You need to be constantly revisiting the governance all the time to understand whether you have the right governance, and then to understand whether the software, whether people are happy or there's some level of unhappiness in the system, that something's brewing that could come back to haunt you in the future. I think it's very important to really have your whistleblowing channels to understand what's going on.
All right, just for those who are listening, we have 15 more minutes. We'd love to have some questions so that Carlos and I, or mostly Carlos can consider them. So now, obviously, you're being groomed, hopefully with success, to be the chairman, and you have your cousin in terms of supporting the next gen, right? And what is their, I mean, of course, not the 7-year-old, which obviously is, you know, very, very young, but what do you feel they are thinking in terms of obligation, quote unquote, or responsibility to this family business? How is their approach? And do you feel it's different? Is it a different world, or is it kind of feel the continuity? Because, you know, Asian families and, you know, Italian, Spanish, you know, there's a lot of familial is very strong, right? Relationship is very tight.
I would say that certainly they feel that we have something special going on in terms of, okay, we are part of a family that is, we define ourselves as a family in business.
Yeah.
So they all here, we have a family gathering once a year. We do a family trip every 2 years where the entire family goes in the trip and we talk about the businesses and we have speakers, etc. We have a program, again, orchestrated by my cousin Nana, in which, you know, maybe 1 year they go and they visit a manufacturing plant. Then after a few months they go and they have a chat, they hear a chat from my uncle about the origins of the family office. So we have a program, but we're executing to make sure they are engaged and they understand our background, where do we come from, what do we have now, our values, our aspirations, etc., and our history. So they feel they belong, but of course, generation 4 is not generation 3 and not generation 2, and each generation has, and also it's not the same. The reality is that it's not the same to have 100% of the shares, to have 50%, to have 15%, to have 3%. And by definition, they will have 3%. Well, by definition, no, because and every family can make different decisions, no? But we have decided that we will, until now at least, that we are splitting equally, you know, the shareholding in the family. So if they end up with a 3%, even that you are super engaged and in the past and so on, and your father used to work or used to be the chairman, most probably you are not going to be involved in the governance, because of 19, maybe 5 are in governance roles, of 6, but not 19. So you have 3%. You are not in governance, and you know you are, I don't know, a lawyer. So by definition, the level of engagement is going to be different. So I think you have a different challenge. And again, I don't have an answer how to keep it ticking. And I think that's why we are members of different family business associations, to try to learn about, okay, what are we going to face in 10 years? What challenges are we going to face in 20 years? How can we start addressing them then today? Because we think that we have something very special. So how do we keep it, but adapting to the new circumstances in which we're not going to be 6, they are going to be 19. So they will have to change the constitution. They will have to change the governance, the bodies. Maybe they will sell one company and buy another. Maybe they have a big fight and they divide everything and the whole thing blows up.
Yeah. And in terms of, so in terms of the entrepreneurial side, like what is being done to foster entrepreneurship? And is there any funds that are created? Is there a process so that the next gen is incentivized to go out there, you know, and start something, and the family backs them? I mean, what's happening on that side? Because you said it's a very entrepreneurial family, right? Well, at least at your generation. How are you going to keep that spirit?
So we put a lot of effort into that around 3 years ago, in which we really, you know, talked to other families. We read as much as we could in the subject to see, okay, what can we put in place to foster entrepreneurship and again within the 19 members. So we started a entrepreneurship club in the family, in which the idea was that they wanted a G4 to be chairing the club and to bring speakers of, you know, early stage founders of companies. Then we created a mechanism in which if you have an idea, even if just a paper idea, we will give you a token amount of money for you to spend around this idea doing maybe market research, maybe just building a website, maybe you have, no questions asked. And I think here you go, you can spend it, and we don't have, you come back and say whether it has worked or not, but no, we are not going to hold you against anything. We are not going to ask you to return. And then also we have in place other mechanisms, in the sense that if you think your idea is going to work, then we fund you to a certain amount. And then, so I don't know it by heart now, because, but we have a funding mechanism in which we fund ideas. So I think that the thinking that went into that was very good. The mechanism we have created are very good. The reality is that I wouldn't say it's working too well, in the sense that you plan something very carefully and then it doesn't work. I don't say it doesn't work. You cannot control where the interests of the children are going to be. Yeah. So you say, guys, what about we do an entrepreneurship club and we do these talks, speakers, and oh yeah, good idea. Then, okay, who wants to chair? Oh, I will chair. And then what happens that maybe the chair, goes into college and he's thinking about his study, he's thinking about, chasing boys or chasing girls, or has an idea. And then it's the club, becomes, priority number 15. Yeah. And of course you can chase him. Okay, why don't you make sure the next meeting, you have to send this email, but it doesn't work. You have to chase someone to do things, doesn't work. So I wouldn't say that the funding mechanism has not been used since it was put in place. So no one has asked. There's been one entrepreneur. So one of the older members, she's the daughter of Susana, that Feisal.
Yes.
Gabriela. She's built a restaurant chain. She has now a store where she sells food online, like a dark kitchen, and then she sells also apparel for the table. So she's spun out a few things. She's super entrepreneurial. Things are working quite well with her. She has restaurants in Turkey, restaurants in Spain. But she never tapped into the funding that was offered for the family. She found other ways to fund her businesses. And so when some things, you try things that you think are going to work and they don't work, and sometimes things that you don't think are going to be used, they are used. So I think that we want to foster entrepreneurship. We've tried a number of things, but as of today, there's no much traction here.
Okay.
With the mechanisms, but there's traction, people become entrepreneur. Yeah. So already is a victory, no?
Yeah.
So I think the jury is still out on this front. Okay. Not easy.
We have 5 more minutes. I'm still encouraging everyone to send questions. I don't know, Carlos, I think you're either sharing too much and they're still thinking and their brains are running at 300 miles an hour. What other things, Carlos, do you feel would be of value that you, your family, G2, G3, G4, that you've created? I know you have one of the most sophisticated family offices in Europe, and you are very open to, like you said, the advisory group, and you're continuously, very active in FBN and other, you have top advisors. We won't go into names, right, that support you in the process. Is there something that you feel you like to share, success or not, right, that would help them with school fees, right, so they don't have to make the mistakes that we all make every now and then?
I think in terms of, I'm looking here on my iPad because I did a chat at business school at ESA a few months ago, and I had a slide about key success factors, about things that I think were instrumental in getting us where we are today. And I would say the most important bit is what you don't see. That is the conversations. So I think it's very important to talk a lot within the family members. So involve everyone, and it is the most difficult part, because, okay, I know what I want to do, I'm going to do it, and then the rest will follow. No. Okay, engage everyone. Okay, what if we do this? What are your ideas? What are your ideas? What do you think? So that this is very time consuming, it's sometimes can be unpleasant, a lot of friction. But again, I think that this pays dividends. The return on investment on on engaging everyone, talking to everyone, making sure that everyone's on board, making sure that everyone understands, because sometimes you say, okay, we're going to create this governance, and people don't follow you. Yeah, why do we need this committee, and why do we need this, and what are you going to do here? So, because people have come from different backgrounds. So making sure the speed of the process is of the least common denominator. So you go at the speed of the slowest one.
Yeah.
Involving and being transparent. No secret, no hidden agendas. No hidden agendas. Be transparent, because the hidden agendas will blow in your face sooner or later. So to me, this is number one. And then number two, what is more visible is have a professional, strong governance. So bring external independent members that are not yes sayers, that are not going to say, oh, yes, sir, yes, sir. People that are going to, because they respect you, but they are successful people as well. So they don't have to always say yes. No, they are going to say what they think. So, and sometimes they will say, I think you're wrong. That's super healthy. So very strong governance with people, independent members with independent thinking that are going to say what they think. I think this is, to me, I will leave it with these two things. Strong governance with independent members, and then within the family, conversation, no hidden agendas, lay out what you think, you think that you're not capable to succeed me because I think that you are not have the right training or background, I say it. And if I think that, you are whatever, say it, because otherwise it creates tension that it's inside you and it's going to blow in the least controlled way, and it's going to cause a lot of damage when it blows up.
Yeah.
So it's better to do contained and confined damage and controlled than a huge explosion at the right time and in the wrong place.
I think one thing to specify, because on the call, when you say independent advisors, right? In your case, that family advisory are all family members of large family businesses or families in business, while other people, when they hear what you just said, would think of outside professionals and advisors. So to me, I'm more skewed to the direction you've done. What is your comment? Obviously, you've done it, so you're obviously more biased in that direction. But why did you choose that versus, ex-advisors, which obviously there's a lot of the big boys, right, that we both know?
Yeah. Well, we chose this way. And again, one thing I didn't mention. So we have this advisory board that meets once a year. And then in the family council that meets 5 times a year, this family council also has independent members. Okay. So it's the 6 cousins, my father, my uncle, and 3 independent members that have voting power. Actually, they have 1/3 of the voting power. So even if it's a confrontation between the 2 branches, the independents will make the final decision, or they will lean. They can lean, so. And I would say that in the family council, there's a combination of professional and family members. It's a combination. Okay. So we also have people that, maybe we have one that comes very successful financial guy from private equity, the investment world, that, we respect him a lot, and he's a member of the family council. So, but he doesn't come from a family in business. Okay. So we have a combination. For the once a year family council, family members, because the big things in the family are always about succession, are always about onboarding the next generation, are about, creating liquidity for family members, are about dividends. And these things, either you have gone through them or otherwise it's difficult to advise. Yes. You have to have gone through this challenge as a family yourself. So that's why we chose people from families, because again, intellectually people can contribute, but if they don't have a family business, it's difficult for them, for example, to have a view about how to onboard the next generation.
Yes. And also when you say transparency, right, it's easy to talk, but when you have to tell your cousin or your brother or your sister, right, or your father or your uncle, it's easier said than done, right? And especially...
Totally, exactly. I don't want to say that it's easy. It's very difficult. Yes. But I think that it's worth to be brave and courageous and, maybe not say everything at once, but, increasingly pushing for a more transparent agenda and more honest conversations incrementally over time.
All right, Carlos, we're at the end of our time. What I'd love to, I know you gave your incredible two elements of success factors based on what you prepared for the university talk. Are there, anything, ending comment that you like to share before you go? A few words of advice or just some words of encouragement, whatever comes up for you.
What comes up is that first to thank you for the opportunity to share my story. I hope that I have made people think about it. And again, there's no one single recipe on how to do the right things. I'm sharing my story, things that have worked for us. Maybe they are not good ideas for other families. What I happy to say that if anyone is interested in having a side conversation with me, Feisal, please feel free to share my email, my contact information with anyone, because I really value when we have received advice from other families. So I'm very happy, and I get also energy from trying to add my small contribution to other families, or at least to help them think about areas maybe that they have not thought. So I'm very happy to continue the conversations. But again, first, it's been a pleasure, Faisal. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Carlos, for an incredible conversation. I mean, we know each other for many, many years, but today we formalized it, quote unquote, in terms of sharing with others. Again, thank you very much for your generosity, not only of your time, but of now, I share your family story with many families that I speak to, but I've never offered them directly, to have the honor and privilege to sit with you or speak to you, about the experience you had and the advice that you can share based on the experiences you've had. So again, thank you, Carlos, for taking the time. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Next week, we have Loy coming in. He's the head of FBN Asia, based in Malaysia, running the largest education group and the large travel group. And he will be sharing again, how he's planning on the longevity and how to, like Carlos shared, get the next generation engaged and, sharing experiences of the family and business, like you shared, Carlos, and at the same time next week. So thank you, everyone, for your time again today. And thank you again, Carlos, for being with us. And we will see you soon, hopefully in Europe, when I come in the next 2 weeks. Okay? Ciao.